Welcome to Think Business Live, Take 10. Looking forward to having a 10-minute talk with Ed Brenegar. Ed, it is great to connect with you, your company, and your book, Circle of Impact. And I love talking about impact, and I love talking about frameworks. And you have a framework
Yes, sir.
that makes an impact. And I love simplicity and everything that your book talks about. Let's talk about let's back up for a minute before we talk about making an impact and getting into the right mindset to actually make an impact. I think that's really where it begins. Can you talk a little bit about just kind of how we get ourselves into the right mindset to make with the right intent to make the impact that we want to make?
Well, I think it begins with the title of your show, which is to think. That we need to think for ourselves. We need to decide that we have the capacity to make our own decisions and make our own choices, and out of that comes the way I define leadership, which is that all leadership begins with personal initiative to create impact. And so, if you're not thinking for yourself and you're simply kind of absorbing what the world is telling you, then you're going to get a lot of really negative messages or confusing messages, and you're not going to be able to really have the impact that you want to have. So this is really about kind of taking ownership of your life and your work.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's a lot to unpack. We could talk for a couple of hours on that, talking about thinking for yourself. So to somebody who's listening to this now or in the future, and they're saying, well, I want to think for myself, but, the narrative in my head is, I want to do this, but in my head, I'm hearing my father say this, my mother say this, my grandmother say this. How do you get to a place where you can get centered to actually know what your own thoughts are for yourself?
Well, I think most of us can, if we take 5 minutes to think about it, can identify something that we'd like to change. It may be a big world type of change, or it may be something really small. It may be something related to our family or our work. And I think that's where we start. We say, okay, I'm going to go change this one thing. And whatever that change I have created there is the impact that I want. And so at that point, I can say, I'm a person of impact. And then you do that again. And then you do that again.
Let's pause for a second, because I love what you're saying, but I want to rewind. When somebody can step into the space where they can think for themselves, now all of a sudden they're not relying on the people that they used to, or the voices in their head where they were comfortable. So now they're kind of a little bit on their own little, not island in a bad way, but now they're, they don't have the same lifelines maybe they had. Mm-hmm. How do you get that person comfortable with actually making the decisions and the results of what that decision is going to provide?
Well, one of the things to do is to think back in time. I mean, back in time may be 2 days, or it could be 18 months, or it could be 25 years. And to identify those moments where you did something that made a difference, and to focus on that moment in time where you had some impact, and what that tells you is that I can do that again.
Yeah.
I think that's where most people are not well in tune with who they are, because they're listening for affirmation and validation from other people, when in a sense they really need to develop that for themselves.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about, right? So sometimes we forget what we've done, but tapping into that energy. I love what you're talking about. Right. So now, Ed, you have the book, The Circle of Impact. You have a framework for success. Tell us a little bit about the framework. I love a structure and framing of things. So share with us that.
Well, the Circle of Impact is based on the alignment of 3 dimensions of leadership. And those 3 dimensions are the dimension of ideas, the dimension of relationships, and the dimension of structure. And that's pretty simple, except that one of those or 2 of those will kind of dominate the third, or the other 2. And so alignment is really trying to figure out what is the impact that I want to have, and then what I want to do is make sure it fits with my purpose and my values. It has a way of fitting into the relationships I have, and then we we need to decide what kind of structure do we actually need to create the impact we want.
Yeah.
So it's easier than it sounds in a 30-second description, but it really is.
Well, sometimes things like this are so easy, they're complicated, and I think sometimes we get in our own way, right? Because some of the stuff we're talking about, other people's voices, this, but when you get down to the simplicity of it, right? So you've said a couple of times, think and take 5 minutes. So when someone is taking 5 minutes of quiet time, executive time, coffee shop time, wherever they are, what are the things they need to do to kind of get to simple?
Well, if they haven't already identified the thing they want to change,
so identify the thing they want to change.
Right, and let's treat that as a problem. We're going to solve that problem, and you can't have solutions without identifying something as a problem. Right. So, what is the problem? Is this problem a problem of my ideas, meaning a lack of clarity about my values and my sense of purpose? Or is this a problem of my relationships with people where there's no respect, or there's a lack of trust, there's no accountability? Or is it a problem where the structure of the work, the business, is not functioning well, in the sense of it providing a way to get to the impact that I want to have? Yeah. So when you decide that it's one of those, then you begin to work at fixing that. And you fix that by not focusing on that dimension, but you pull the other two dimensions in to fix it. So if you have a relationship problem, you're going to, instead of going to that person and saying, we need to fix our relationship, now you go to them and say, I want us to work better together. So here's some of the ideas that I thought we might want to talk about. Or what would you like us to talk about? What kind of information would you like me to send to you? And in so doing, what way do you want me to send that to you? You want it in an email? Do you want it in a text message? That sort of thing. So we use wherever the problem is, the other two become our resources for solving it.
Yeah, you use the word dimension a lot, and so when you talk about different dimensions, how does that kind of fall into alignment as we talk about raising levels of consciousness, is what you're also talking about, because the same level of knowledge that got us where we are can't get us to where we want to go. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about dimensions and consciousness, how do people kind of, as they begin to grow, keep that momentum and not fall backwards?
Well, if there is a linear progression to this, it begins with your ideas, and it begins with being really clear about what the values are that you want to base your life on and base your business on. And out of that, you can define what your purpose is, your purpose for impact. You can define what impact is. And at that point, then you go look for the people who share those same values, that same purpose, that same desire for impact. And then together you create a vision for what kind of structure you need to have to work together to make that happen. So to me, that consciousness has to do not just with your own internal mindset and your own heart, but also how you are in communication with people where you're sharing the similar values and purposes.
Ed, who's made the biggest heartfelt impact in your life?
Wow, that's a big story. There are a lot of people who have had a significant impact on my life, and I would say, I'll give you two quick ones. One is my grandmother. I was a pretty wild kid growing up, venturesome. And when I was probably 12, she said, you can do whatever you want to do, but just do not bring shame to the family name. Yeah. And that stuck with me, and it's given me boundaries for making decisions. The other was my high school football coach. And I grew up in the South in a segregated school system. And my senior year, they hired a black man as our head football coach. And we watched him deal with racism at a very high level, and his dignity and his integrity as a man had a significant impact on most of us who were his players. And so I look back on him as sort of setting a goal, or setting an image in my mind as to the kind of person that I wanted to be. And I'm grateful for both of those because that happened to me as a young person. That made a lot of difference.
Well, I'm grateful for you sharing those stories. I know you're doing great soulful work, making an impact in a lot of lives with your book and the work that you do. Tell everybody, Ed, where they can buy your book and connect with you.
Well, they can buy the book at Amazon. Just Google or Amazon Google my name, and you'll find my list of books there. I've done some short books, as I wrote some during the pandemic. Or they can reach out to me at my email, ed@brenegar.com, and I'm glad to sell them one with an inscription. If they want to send it. I mean, we're coming up on the end of the school year, and this is an ideal book for high school and college graduates. So if they want to do something like that, I'd be glad to do that as well.
I love it. The Circle of Impact, a framework for success, can be bought on Amazon. Ed, I appreciate your time. Thanks for taking all of your experiences and everything that you've done, putting it into a book, and just doing what you do on a daily basis. It is, it's reading is a powerful thing. And when we can take, years and years and decades of experience and read it in a couple hours or listen to it, it makes a huge impact for so many people that you touch. And I'm sorry, and probably ones that you will never know you do, but have made a huge impact on. So I appreciate you being on the show. Think Community, if Ed can help you connect with him, please. And you can check out his book on Amazon. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome day. Ed, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, John.